GreenCity is a worker co-op, so it's a equal pay, equal say organisation, horizontal. Everybody takes a turn with the decision making, has equal input into that. There's 60 members of us. We've been going since 1978 and I've been with GreenCity 28 years now. And it's got a turnover of just over 9 million. And while we're in Fife, we need to mention the Fife diet, and I think that the fact that when it was announced the people were eating within a 20-30 mile radius, it actually made the national news. So it shows you how removed we are from our food culture, that actually something that should be the norm and should be quite a thing that's encouraged and done in a wide area, that it shows you that was looked on as some oddity and something that was made news, sort of thing. So there's a lot of good things happening with the Scottish Government. We've got the Good Food Nation bill. There's a big commitment for the well-being economy. So again, looking at, rather than just parameters of GDP, looking at like health and well-being, and what values that correspond with yourself, and what makes you happy. So we've also got the National Strategy for Economic Transformation, which I think is going to get launched in September, October time. So these are all encouraging signs, but ultimately we're as consumers, we're beholden to the multiples, and they hold so much power and sway that we've got such a removal from how food's produced and meeting the actual people who produce it. That's how this event's so amazing. And yeah, I think there's a lot of good things happening at a government level, but I suppose for us it's like, how do we take some of that market share from the multiples into small, independent, family-run businesses that have a focus on organic and focus on the local. And in Scotland, we've had a lot of encouraging signs that there's a demand within consumers. There's been a massive explosion in the last 10 years of zero waste shops. The farm shop industry is really taken a big growth as well. Not all organic, obviously, but I think the focus with the locals really positive. So yeah, so I think how do consumers make a difference as well? It's like looking out for logos that reflect your values. So if you look for soil health, biodiversity, then it's looking at the organic mark, whether it's Soil Association or Organic Growers and SOPA. Also, if for our overseas products, then the fair trade mark's a fantastic game changer for like empowering producers themselves. They give and it democratises the supply chain as well, which for me, being in a co-op, that for me is really important, that actually it's no down to one person to have a decision. It's the full cooperative that can then, the premium that's paid, then they can decide for themselves whether they want to invest it in healthcare or education or infrastructure like building bridges and stuff like that. So for our overseas product, I think the fair trade mark's really powerful, and I'm glad to say GreenCity was one of the instigators of that.
When did you start?
We started in 1978.
So in 81 I was working on a city farm in Bristol with the animals, but had a little farm shop. In 84 I opened the first one-stop organic shop in the southwest of England, working with lots and lots of farmers and producers, and really kind of putting it out there, trying to make a connection between plot to plate, and inviting people to say that there is a different way, and it was pretty popular. Since then I have done lots around retail and a little bit around farming. So I grew in a walled garden and really got stuck into that plot to plate, getting there at in the summer months at 5 in the morning and picking, and then get by 9 o'clock it was in front of the customers. Started off as Phil's Better Food campaign, then became the Better Food campaign, and then became the Better Food Company, and now it's just known as Better Food. And it grew out of the back kitchen, and then it became a little warehouse just delivering food. And now bring it on to today, we have 4 organic local shops, organic local ethical shops in Bristol, 110 people, 7.5 million turnover, and struggling to make anything on the bottom line in a food system that is entirely broken, which is what I think we really want to come round to. I just want to say a tiny bit about Bristol, because I think it is a fairly unique city in the world of food anyway. It had 3 and then 4 city farms. It had a fantastic report by somebody called Joy Carey called Who Feeds Bristol? We've got a whole kind of framework for action on food, and we have a Bristol Food Council, which again comes out of local government. If we can move on to radical retail. What is radical retail? Previous session, I don't know what his name, he's not there at the back, he's gone to get a coffee, but he was talking about his box scheme, which was a community supported agriculture project. And Joe Hunt. Well, Joe just told a little story there about how he was £10,000 in deficit, and he told his customers, and his customers came along and met him and said, right, we're stumping this money up, you've paid out, that's our food, we're paying for it. Simple as that. And to me, that's a very important component of radical retail. So community supported agriculture, community supported food distribution, I think. So if you want to stick that up as a starter for 10, I'm going to give you a couple, and then I want you guys to come up with some thoughts. And I think this is, just be as wild as you like in your thoughts about this, because they will all end up being really, really useful. But one of the things, if we accept the fact that our food system is hopelessly broken at the moment, and that supermarkets as they exist on this planet today are an abomination against food, against anything to do with equality and access and things. One of the things that I think I'm also a bit involved in, you might call it the third sector, it's sort of the charity sector, but one of the things that we're involved in is in that sector is social enterprise. And the words that keep on coming up is solidarity, not charity. So again, that's another thing to me which is really important in terms of the design of what we do and how we address inequality, because most of us will know that there's plenty of us who can afford to go and buy organic and really good local food, but there's a hell of a large section of society who don't have that possibility. They don't have the money in their pockets, they don't have the mindset which says this is really important to me. So addressing inequality for me is a very important part of radical retail, and it's a really big challenge. I'm thinking about what else might be. I mean, there are some obvious ones like true localism is an important part of radical retail to me. Scott, have you got any thoughts that you want to put in there, and then we'll start getting you guys to put more forward?
I think a lot is from some of the barriers anyway. It's like in Scotland we're good at producing the primary product, but then it's like, how do you add value? So a lot of we've seen a proliferation in really innovative kombucha suppliers and stuff like that are basically, now that you've got infrastructure like bottling plants and canning plants, then I think that's helped a good, just being able to have the actual infrastructure to add value to your primary product sort of thing. And I think that's where you once you've got some infrastructure, then you get the innovation. And I think like the Bow House is a great example of that, where it's got Scotland the bread, it's got people doing kimchis and sauerkrauts and organic beers and that, and it's like, if that entity wasn't there, then these other innovators would be like quite disparate. And
so that's enterprise stacking.
Yeah.
Stacking enterprises, yeah.
And
Would that sum that up? We need people shouting out from the audience as well, please.
So infrastructure.
Circular economy,
Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed. What do you think are some actionable component parts of a circular economy? How do you actually deliver a bit of a circular economy?
I think willingness to collaborate, so people relationships.
Yeah.
Relationships is the first thing.
Yeah.
Great.
Trust.
Yeah, trust. That's great.
I was going to say procurement, public procurement, so doing things at scale. I'm from the Soil Association. I was in a meeting with my Scottish colleagues yesterday, and they were talking about a project called Give Peas a Chance.
Give peas a chance.
Yeah. Which is a farmer, a local farmer, who's supplying peas to a school caterer, and they've done a 12-week programme with lots of peas in the food. And the good news is no children complain to their parents about the amount of peas they're eating, so they take that as a success. But the point is they're doing it at some scale, so almost sort of by the kids are kind of consuming this food without really knowing what it is they're consuming. But the important thing is that the caterers are really on board with the supply chain.
So that's relationships it's coming under.
Partly it's a funded programme, so in order to get the stuff off the ground, you have to kind of support it properly. But I guess the key thing is it's putting a supplier right in the path of the caterer.
Okay, so linking
the supplier and the caterer.
The Scottish Government done quite a lot with meet the buyer thing, and I think overall, like the public contracts, not just for food, everything in Scotland's worth 16 billion. 7 billion of that goes off overseas to foreign companies or companies that are based in the Cayman Islands, and only 2 billion is with SMEs. So I think there's probably a lot of work to be done there in terms of removing the barriers, and rather just being like the SME supplying the company that's based in the Cayman Islands, get them to supply direct. And
I think talking about your closed economy thing, like in Bristol, there was the Bristol pound for a while, and Bristol City Council used that as a currency, so that meant that they had to buy from local suppliers. So that was a really good way of forcing the issue, because you're sort of engineering the relationships at scale.
I mean, we've got great examples, the same with the Cleveland model and the Preston model. Again, we've got examples there that we could encourage other councils to adopt, sort of thing.
So I'm quite interested in about how radical retail can work with supermarkets, which is actually where most people buy their food from.
The thing is not to make enemies and divide into tribes. And this whole movement is inclusive, isn't it? So the whole point about regenerative movements is that everyone can come along no matter how far back they are.
Using existing infrastructure.
Yeah.
Ultimately, supermarkets are, as a business, it's people and it's buildings and it's supply chain.
Absolutely.
The other bit is utilising existing infrastructure, which is part of the national planning framework, to say, let's not build things anew, let's figure out how we can use existing things.
All of 20 years ago, I did a session with, it was something to do with the Soil Association. I can't remember exactly what the event was, but I think it was their annual meeting for the trustees, and they had they invited me along, and as a retailer, and they invited somebody from Sainsbury's along to give their different thoughts. And I thought, okay, kind of this is just going to be polarizing in a way. So I decided to write this little piece, what it would be like as if I was the new CEO of Sainsbury's, designing how it could be, And actually, it's not rocket science. You know, you could start getting local shareholders in pensions as opposed to off-seas shareholders. You could do an awful lot about the distribution and working with local farms and having at least 25% of your products in the shop from the local area. And you could build, I mean, they have the power and the ability and the resources to do so much positive work. But people have been telling them this for the last 25 years or so, and it's very, very difficult to see where, maybe now with the shit hitting the fan a bit more, as in we might have more open doors. But generally speaking, what used to happen is that people would go and work with the supermarkets with the best intentions of doing something really positive, and after about 4, 5, 6 years they would just get tired of banging on a door that wouldn't open, and they would leave and go off and do something more positive. So I think, Geraldine, I think you're right that we shouldn't pariah these institutions, but we do need to be realistic about where they are, and they've always been followers. Supermarkets have always been followers. So, you know, take Refill in stores, which has grown enormously over the last 10 years. Supermarkets have now, I think, who was the first one? Was it Waitrose who's got in there? Yeah, but they're starting to play around at the edges. Right, yeah.
Oh yeah, I think that's a really good point. Have I put procuring, co-opting existing systems?
Yeah, good.
Ideally, you want pluralism in the high street, and you want pluralism for even some of the larger conglomerates, say like what they used to call the A, B, C and D food, the ADM, Bunge, Cargill, Dreyfus, that control like 80% of all grain production sort of thing, and distribution, where they've like vertically integrated the supply chain market, where they own the farms, they own the shipping, they own the logistics, they own the grain processing plants. So it's like, how do we take because when you've got a stranglehold of 5 or 6 companies, then you can see the price, the profiteering within there is that's the reason why our food's so expensive. Is partly to do with climate change as well, but a lot of it is to do with profiteering with these big companies, and even
anti-monopoly.
Yes, I think so. It'd be part of a solution, because as I said, like Bunge's now trying to merge with another larger company, and the National Farmers Union in Canada have written a big piece about that, because again they're going, I think they estimated that it would have like a $700 million dollar impact on the farmers. So again, we try to, the more options the farmers have got, the more options that consumers have got, the better chance that you have of a fairer distribution system. So,
what about education and people's relationship with food?
Yeah,
I actually think
big
that's
one.
important. So we talk about this a lot, and obviously, as you just talked about, it's very easy to put retailers as the problem point. But actually, if we really look at the problem of food in general, it's actually the consumers, because they're the people who decide where they spend their money and how they spend their money. And I think our relationships with food over the years, in the last 50 years, have completely altered. We've gone from being very local, where you went to your local shop, to go into places where you can get anything you want whenever you want it. And if you don't have it, you're very angry about it. You know what I mean? If you can't get an avocado, now 20 years ago, where would you have got an avocado from? You know what I mean? 20 years ago, in winter, where would you have got tomatoes from? These things didn't exist. So the problem is, our society, global society, has changed so quickly that we expect and demand as consumers to have what we want when we want it. And that's one of the big problems, isn't it? So therefore, everyone has to look externally for these resources. So bigger companies then get the ability to kind of command that, because they're seeing a global market. You get the power of scale that comes with that. And I think that's one of the core things that we really need to challenge, is how do we bring that back? And that has to start partly with education. People don't know where their food comes from. So you go to a supermarket and you get chicken. But what's chicken? what is chicken? You know what I mean?
Chefs don't know where their food comes from.
So, very interesting this. We went to, as a little treat, we went to the Three Chimneys up on Skye, very lovely restaurant, and they get all of their produce locally. I said, great, where's your lamb from? He said, from Mary down the road. I said, oh, that's great. What is it? And he said, lamb. And I said, what breed of lamb is this? And he said, don't know, I think it sounded French. And that is a top Michelin starred restaurant who can't tell me what we're actually eating. And that's part of the problem, isn't it? So we have a plethora, you know, you go into a supermarket, you buy beef, what beef is it, what lamb is it? There is no education, nobody knows where it's coming from. And we've lost that kind of part of communication as well, where you would go to a local butcher and he'd tell you the story. You know, don't get the bacon at the moment, it's not as good as it has been, sort of, do you know what I mean? And you get a little bit more education on a daily basis, but we just don't have that. And that's part of why the retailers are now so powerful, because people don't know what they're buying, but go to the shops and buy what they get. You know, we went to Tesco's on the way up, didn't we, to get a few treats. We couldn't find a single Scottish cheese in Tesco's. No. Other than the mass-produced ones.
I think the interesting thing is how radical retail can actually deliver some of that. And so it's what are the vehicles to actually say hello to people and tell them about the breed of the lamb, or where something comes from, or what matters in terms of microbial activity in our soils, because it's alien to most people. And I think telling the story is probably one of the most important parts of being a retailer. If you're not telling stories, then you don't really deserve to be in that space, in my view. But it's not an easy ask. You know, you can have events. I think events are an important part of retail, and you can have events which are about sharing. You know, like we did one with fish in our stores recently. We had a big supper club, and somebody who came to speak, who was our local fish supplier, and they're quite radical in how they approach things. So sometimes we'll get fish in our retail stores that is on the endangered list, and simply because it's been a bycatch of something. So instead of throwing it back in, say I'm not allowed that, and the fish dying and being eaten by other fish, you find it in our stores. And it's a very interesting story, and it really does make you sit up and think about, what am I doing when I eat fish, and what is this fish, and where does it come from? So I think events are, and hospitality. I mean, there's a term, actually. My mum and her partner wrote a book just come out just now called Radical Hospitality. I'll just show you the cover. Why not? It's a bit of an indulgence, so excuse me, but yeah, so that has a lot of the components that I also think transfer well into radical retail, because actually hospitality and sharing and invitation to express yourself in different ways, I think, is at the heart of, I suppose for me actually it's also about service. You know, it's like if you say I am in the service to a better world, and I'm going to do that through retailing, what maximizes the impact of that? And part of it is the honor of actually bringing food from a farm and offering it to people in the high street. In radical retail, you're looking at artisan scale generally, as opposed to a huge factory churning out ready meals or whatever. So there are all sorts of component parts to that. But again, it becomes about the story and engaging with people. And the wonderful thing about small is beautiful, if you like, in terms of retail, is that generally speaking, if you're the shopkeeper or the CSA farmer, then you've got a vested interest in telling that story daily to your customers, and so it's much easier to do that. But we need thousands more of them, and I think one of the things that, if anything, that I want to sort of say about where to next is that we all need to get off our asses and be radical retailers in a way, even if it's in a micro, you know, just one product from one farm, saying I'm going to find 20 people who want that product and tell that story. We need to build scale around alternatives to the supermarkets, and that means an awful lot of us actually just saying, could I get involved in some kind of a little enterprise? Could I work with a farmer? Could I work with 3 or 4 other people? Could we build a new co-op? You know, whatever it is. But now is the time to, if you have the will to get out there and actually do something, actually make something happen. We have something like 12,000 transactions a week in our stores, and 80% of those, 75%, 80% of those are people who can really afford it. There's another 25% of people who make damn sure they afford it because it's important to them in one shape or form or another. But the connections that we have with social enterprise and charities around the city is really, really vital. So one which I'm involved in is called Heart of BS13 in the place that Jerry mentioned, Hartcliffe, which is one of the 10 most deprived wards in the country. And they have a kitchen where they make thousands of meals every week, and they sell those for next to nothing, way below the cost of making them, to the local community. And so they are getting really, really good quality meals. But then another 50% or more of those meals go to shops like ours, and we sell them as a pay it forward. So we take nothing apart from a kind of handling charge, if you like. So all the margin goes back to the charity, which is, again, we're trying to encourage our customers to see that as not charity but solidarity. And we've got the same going with a bread loaf that we get every Tuesday. We get this amazing bread, and all that money goes back into that sector. And so I think we have a responsibility in retail to immediately start connecting with how do we address inequality. And it's small, but it's meaningful as well. And it's a story and a message.
And as a wholesaler as well, from our side of things, then we try to put a wee bit extra margin on like the soft drinks, sugary stuff, and then try to bring less of a margin on the whole food and the natural side of things as well. So yeah, but I think the other it's no retail as well, but the other thing in the toolkit is community meals, and I think they are getting beyond food banks, and it is that where just like people eating together is such a powerful thing. It's really like I was a part of a community centre for like 9 years, and when we started bringing the community meals in, it was just like you're getting so vast a variety of different people, and then all these barriers started coming down, because it's the one of the few things that everybody loves is food, and then it was like you were getting people where it was some nights there were just people coming and eating, and they were going, well, we want to give back to the community, so do you want to, we'll do some Eritrean food, and we were like, hell yeah.
And that's radical hospitality.
Yeah.
You know, that is the essence of that. And it all is part of this,
circular,
really,
and
beautiful. Yeah, there's an outfit down our way called The Long Table, and that's what they do. They go around putting on meals in communities, kind of travelling around doing it, and pay what you can. So some people will pay nothing and others will pay 100 quid. And they kind of accept that, and it's done with volunteers and a couple of paid chefs, but it seems to work. I've certainly enjoyed one or two.
Yeah. Can I just mention one other thing, which
yeah.
is schools, which we haven't talked about, of starting education early, and lots of schemes that aren't there, getting school kids to come out and try.
Yeah, no,
food.
Absolutely. And I was interested in what Lucy said about the P project, or whatever you called it.
Yeah.
Give peas a chance, yeah. Like you mentioned that actually it doesn't the kids are just eating it and not really thinking, but actually it is an opportunity also to make that connection. I'm sure somebody's doing it.
The key is to cooperate. I ran a farm shop a long time ago, did it all on my own, burnt out completely. And if I'd done it again, I would have cooperated with other farmers and with other people in my community to develop a cooperative governance model. And that shares the risk, but it also gets that community of support that you need to survive. So a business model like Unicorn in Manchester has done well because it is a cooperative, and that's how it generates that community of support, even when people pay a bit more on price. So I think it's about cooperation and getting the right governance models. It's key, but also to learn from failure. Don't lose Ruth Anslow from Hisby into another amazing project that she's going to run. What can we learn from her in terms of the the things that went wrong and how we can change that. I'm really keen to understand what the business model is.
Well, I mean,
we'd love to fund it.
I think a real resource around that, whether you're going into a collaborative cooperative project or as a sole trader or limited company or whatever, is an outfit called Better Food Traders, and they are. I'm not sure if they're a charity or a CIC, but anyway, they basically offer advice and workshops and gatherings, not dissimilar to a tent like this sometimes, where everybody's working together. And I've certainly contributed as a retailer who's been doing this a long time. I've certainly been honoured to be a part of helping others, including Hisby, and actually also Lockavore very briefly. It is very tough retailing on the high street. Personally, I think it's about the sharing and the collaboration. I don't think it's necessarily about the governance model. I think it's about getting the right components in there and really understanding them, and the skill sets and advice. Having the right board, if you like, who are really well set up to give you good guidance, I think is also a real key.
It just keeps on occurring to me. Imagine what the world would look like if some of these ideas were things that supermarkets just did. So imagine if supermarkets could pay it forward scheme. Imagine if supermarkets had certain product lines with varying scales of, I can appreciate that you wouldn't want to give your margin away on your health and body care products or your alcohol, but you could give away some margin on your milk or your bread or your tins of tomatoes. Imagine if supermarkets bought into that model. Well, that's where it would that would be radical.
And there is a really good toolkit if anybody is interested in setting up a retail place, but it's part of the Unicorn Grocery. It's called Grow a Grocery, and then it tells you their tactics for taking on the supermarkets and to put the point of difference on sort of things. So worth checking out.
There was one other last thing actually. I was involved in something that didn't happen, which was a kind of people's supermarket model. In Bristol, in a very deprived area of Bristol, and the ideas that people were putting forward was to put a sort of Better Food or a Hisby or a Rockabore in there, and I said, this is just a death knell before you've even opened the door. You really need to put your crisps and your pop and all the cheap crap that everybody's eating in that community, otherwise they're not going to turn up. But what you can do is make sure you give space to a really big entrance, which is all about welcoming and looking at alternatives and demonstration of cooking. And there's one of the great projects in Heart of BS13 was the Slow Cooker project, and that really addresses that convenience thing to an extent. It's very easy to do, and these wonderful people in this charity were giving away these cookers, but not just giving them away, going into their homes. So it's very intensive work, but it's having real traction. And I think when you can demonstrate to people who haven't got many resources that there are ways of piggybacking on things and just doing little bits, then you've got a hope in hell of actually making a difference to people's lives, whilst also saying you're not a pariah for coming in here with all the pop and all the rest of it, because that is their reality. Anyway, blah 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 blah. It's lovely to speak with you all, and if you get all your ideas, that's where it's got to come from the floor up. And yeah, great, bring it on. Thank you.